Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place where every footfall kicks up dust, where the fields are cracked like old leather, and the sun doesn't set it glares. The sky has been silent for weeks, and the wind doesn't carry birdsong, only the rustle of dry leaves and the mutters of desperate villagers. You're not a knight, not a monk, not a farmer. You're something weirder. You're a weather prophet in a medieval village during a drought, and yes, that job sucks as much as it sounds. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before dawn. Not because there's anything to do there isn't, but because the heat makes sleep brittle. It's the kind of dry heat that sinks into your mouth, the kind that turns breath into parchment. You sit up on your cot, which is little more than burlap stretched over a warped frame, and rub the grit from your eyes. There's no dew, no mist. Just the same endless aching clarity that's haunted the village for weeks, maybe months. You've lost count. Your home is a wattle and daub cube, the size of a pantry by modern standards. The thatch above your head is thinning. A few frogs used to nest up there in wetter days now, they're gone. Nothing croaks anymore. Nothing chirps. The world is quiet, and somehow that's worse than storms. Outside, the air already hums. Heat will rise before the sun even crests the tree line. You step into it like wading into an invisible bath, your feet crunching over dry straw and the skeletal remnants of grass. Around you, the village lies in various stages of stillness and hope. Some houses have herbs hanging from windows, brown and crumbling. Others have shallow bowls by the doors to invite the rain spirits, as if spirits are thirsty for pottery. Nobody talks much anymore. Words use up moisture. Instead, you get glances, looks, heavy ones. They don't say, "Fix this," but they don't have to. You're the village weather prophet, or rain caller, or sky reader, or that weird person who once said there'd be a storm and then it stormed 2 weeks later, so now we're pretty sure they know something. Historians still argue whether medieval weather prophets were respected or feared. Often they were both, a source of comfort when things went well, and a scapegoat when things didn't. Which is to say, your job security is about as solid as a soap bridge in July. You make your way to the village square. It's not really a square. It's more like a dusty depression between a chicken pen and a public oven that hasn't been lit in days. The well sits at the center, and it's down to mud. You hear a child sobbing because she was the last one to draw a bucket, and it wasn't enough. Someone has etched symbols on the well stones, probably old Tilda, who thinks every problem can be solved with more chalk and muttering. You don't scoff. You used to scoff. Not anymore. Not since that one time she scrawled a sun with no eyes, and the next day your uncle tripped on a ladder and broke 3 ribs. Coincidence? Sure, but you don't scoff. Instead, you sit cross-legged under the old linden tree, which has exactly 4 leaves left. You close your eyes and pretend to listen to the wind, even though there isn't any. This is part of the show. The role. You don't have visions. Not really, but if you sit long enough, sometimes ideas drift up from somewhere beneath the silence. Today, nothing drifts. Still, by mid-morning, people start to gather. Not for news, there hasn't been real news since the travelling tanner fell into the river 2 months ago and came out with a leech on his nosebutt because watching you commune with the sky is more entertaining than watching carrots. Wilt. There's a rhythm to this. You sit, they stare, someone clears their throat, and eventually someone asks the question, "Will it rain?" 3 words. A whisper, really. but they carry weight like a cartload of stones. You open your eyes slowly, dramatically. Theatrics are half the job. I felt something last night, you say, voice low. A shift. This is a lie. You felt a draft because the window was broken and a fox brushed against the wall. But you don't say that. A shift in the west wind, you add, because it sounds mystical. And they nod, not because they understand, but because they need to. One woman places a bowl of barley at your feet. Payment. Another gives you a crust of bread so dry it could cut your gums. You accept it solemnly. Because if you don't, they'll think the spirits are displeased. A child sneezes. Dust. Just dust. A quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, sneezing during a drought was seen as an omen either of rain or plague. Sometimes both. Depends who sneezes and when. Superstition isn't consistent. It's more of an improv show with higher stakes. By noon, you retreat to your hut. Your head aches not from visions, but from trying to invent hope without inventing lies. You drink the last of your water. It tastes like old tin and moss. You chew on the bread, slowly, because it's a ritual now. Every movement deliberate, measured, controlled. That night, someone knocks on your door. You freeze. It's not a knock of emergency, not panic. It's deliberate, measured, controlled. You open the door and see 3 villagers, elders. One holds a pouch, another holds a bundle of dried mint. The third just stares. "We want a reading," the mint holder says. You sigh. You want to scream, actually, but instead you nod. Because this is the job. This is the role. You are the last sliver of control they think they have, the human barometer. You spread the pouch's contents on the floor. Dried beans. They want a casting. You arrange them in a spiral. Hum a nonsense tune. Pretend to interpret the layout. The rain is shy, you say. We must coax it gently. With offerings. With patience. They nod again. They always do. And then they leave. When they're gone, you gather the beans and bury them under your floorboards. They might be the only seeds left in the village. That night, you dream of clouds. Not soft and white, but heavy and bruised with water. You wake with wet cheeks and realize you've cried in your sleep. Outside, the stars blink above a bone-dry world. You whisper to the sky. Not because you believe it listens, but because silence is too dangerous now. And somewhere in the dark, an owl hoots once then, never again. The morning begins the same way it always does. Dry lips, sore throat, and a faint bitterness at still being the one they expect answers from. You stretch your legs, groaning as your knees pop like damp firewood. You're not even old. Not really. But the drought ages everyone. It pulls you inward, dries your joints, dries your soul. The villagers think your role makes you immune. If only they knew the truth that being a weather prophet in a year like this is like being a ship's captain on a sea made of sand. The linden tree has died. You find it just after sunrise while you're pretending to inspect cloud patterns. It's not dramatic, no splintered trunk or toppled limbs, just stillness, bark that's gone soft like paper. Leaves that don't fall because there's nothing left to drop. You touch it gently and feel it crumble beneath your fingers. It was the oldest tree in the village. You remember kids carving their names into it, couples kissing beneath it, old men leaning against it to play bones in the shade. Now, it's a statue of loss. You're tempted to say a prayer. But what God listens to weather prophets? The villagers gather anyway. They notice the tree. They see your face. You don't have to say anything. They just assume the omen is bad. It is. But you lie. You say the tree's death means it gave its last strength to the skies, that its spirit has gone upward. You even toss in a fragment of a Latin phrase you half remember from a traveling monk. They nod solemnly. One weeps quietly. Another leaves a chicken feather at the roots, which is weird, but you say nothing. Historians still argue whether weather prophets had any formal training, or if they were simply clever improvisers with good timing and sharper memories than their neighbors. You fall squarely into the latter camp. You've never read a scroll or seen a celestial chart, but you remember. You remember which birds nest in what month, which weeds bloom before the first frost, which wind brings the dust and which one brings the thunder. Right now, you'd settle for any wind at all. The village decides to dig a new well, not because there's reason to believe they'll find water, but because doing something feels better than praying. You're invited to choose the spot. This is delicate. Too close to the last well, and they'll think you're playing it safe. Too far, and they'll grumble about wasted labor. You choose the meadow near the old goat pens, not because of any spiritual insight, but because you remember a time, 2 years ago, when mushrooms grew wild there after a brief storm. Mushrooms mean moisture. Maybe. Digging begins. Blisters bloom. Hopes rise. You don't dig. That would ruin the illusion. Instead, you sit nearby with a piece of polished horn and divine its direction. Every time someone finds a worm or a patch of damp dirt, they cheer like children. You nod wisely, pretending you saw it all in your visions. That night, the village offers you the first bowl of porridge in weeks. It's more bark than oat, but it's warm, and it's theirs. A gift of belief. You eat slowly, carefully, because to refuse is an insult, and because you can't afford to cough in front of them if your health fails, they'll call it a sign, or worse, a curse. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval villages believed that if a rain prophet fell ill, it meant their spirit had been stolen by a storm, which living in the clouds. The cure? Bake a cake shaped like a frog and burn it under a walnut tree. You're pretty sure your village doesn't know that one, yet. The digging continues for 2 days. On the third, someone finds water. Not much, not enough, but a sheen, a glisten of dampness, like a whispered maybe. They scream, "Dance!" One man strips naked and rolls in the mud. You laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in days. Of course, it's a false spring. The water doesn't rise, it just sulks there, a puddle of apology. But for one glorious evening, hope returns. And they sing. You watch from your doorstep. You hum along. And in that moment, you feel powerful. Not because you made the rain come, but because you helped make joy bloom, even briefly. The next morning, the puddle is gone. But no one blames you. Not yet. Instead, they ask for stories. Not predictions this time, stories about other famines, other droughts. They want to know that this has happened before, that it ends, eventually. You tell them of the dry year of the sparrow, a tale you half remember from your uncle. Supposedly, back then, the birds flew backward to avoid the heat. People wore damp cloths around their necks and carried beetles in their pockets for luck. You make up half the details, but they don't question it, because stories are salves. That night, a boy comes to you alone. He can't sleep. He asks if the moon controls the rain. You tell him, maybe. He asks if crying will help the sky learn how. You tell him, probably not. But it might help him. So he cries into your sleeve while you pat his back and promise the clouds are listening. You're not sure they are. The next day, a dog dies. Then a chicken. Then a goat. People stop singing. Whispers begin again. What if the prophet is cursed? What if the tree died because of them? You hear it all. You say nothing. Instead, you leave the village for the afternoon. You walk past the stumps of dried-out herbs, past the rock that used to be a pond, and climb the small hill overlooking the eastern fields. You sit and listen. Not for answers, but for anything. There's a hum. Faint, barely, there, but real. A breeze. You turn your face toward it, close your eyes. It smells like dust and ash, but also something else. Change. When you return, the village asks if you've seen a sign. You don't hesitate. Yes, you say. But it's shy. We must show patience and silence. For 3 days, the village is the quietest it's ever been. No shouting, no dogs barking. Even the children whisper, they believe. Again. And on the 4th day, a cloud. Just one, but it drifts above like a forgotten promise. You raise your hands and say nothing. Let them feel it. Let them own the miracle. No rain falls. Not yet. But it will. Eventually, you start the day before the sun rises, not because of some holy ritual or mystical weather sign, but because you're nervous, terrified, if we're being honest. Your dreams were restless last night. You kept seeing clouds that turned into wolves, devouring stars, howling across an empty sky. It's probably just your stomach there, hasn't been meat in days, but still, it lingers. And in a village that watches your every blink, even a moment of unease feels dangerous. You walk to the village center, where a group of women are already boiling stones to flavor water. You nod. They nod back, respectfully, but distantly, like you're a precious tool, useful, but weird. No one invites you to sit. That's fine. It's always been this way, hasn't it? Even before the drought, weather prophets in this region have long been half revered, half feared. You exist somewhere between healer, seer, and scapegoat. If the skies smile, you're blessed. If the skies rage, you're suspicious. Historians still argue about the actual duties of weather prophets, whether they offered concrete predictions or simply provided emotional ballast in difficult times. Your job, as far as you've figured it, is 20% guessing, 30% storytelling, and 50% standing still, while people project all their hopes and fears onto your back. Today, they need hope, desperately. The wind has changed direction. You felt it early, brushing your right cheek instead of your left as you climbed the hill. It's not much, but it's something, and something is enough for them to cling to. You tell them that this new wind comes from the northern sea, that it carries moisture in its belly, that it smells like kelp and fog. You don't know if any of that's true, but it sounds like it could be. And sounding believable is 90% of the job. A child claps. An old man kneels. Someone brings you a turnip with a bite already taken out of it. It's all they had to offer. You accept it with gratitude. But privately, you're uneasy. Because yesterday, you saw the village's only surviving cow collapse while trying to stand, and the moon has gone oddly red these past few nights, hanging over the field like a bruised eye. You know enough about signs to realize, when too many good omens cluster together, they often mask a bad one. Still, you can't say that. You smile. You tell stories. You remind them of the legend of the dripping oak tree that weeps when rain is near. There's no dripping oak in this region, of course, but you make one up. Say it's just a few hills over. Say you visited it once in your youth. Say it cried the night before the great harvest of 1302. The people sigh. A few whisper prayers. Someone leaves you a necklace of beads, strung with bits of charred wheat and tiny bones. You're not sure what it's for. Maybe protection, maybe thanks. You wear it anyway. The well is still dry. So they dig deeper, and they expect you to bless it. You walk to the edge, murmur a few Latin-sounding phrases, they don't know Latin, and toss in a pebble you've soaked in lavender oil. Where did you get lavender oil? You found it last month in a ruined hut outside the village. Been saving it for a moment like this. The pebble makes a small splash, not water, just sludge, but it gives them something to believe in. A quirky tidbit. In certain medieval French villages, weather prophets would sing into wells to encourage rain. Not actual songs, just drawn-out vowel sounds, like a bee in pain. You try it. Everyone listens in dead silence. Then someone claps, then another. Soon the entire square is clapping. You almost cry, because for one brief, absurd moment, it feels like magic might actually work. Then the dogs start howling. It's eerie. 1, then 2, then 5. All of them. At once. They point their noses upward, as if seeing something you cannot. The sky is still blue, not bright hazy, grayish but not stormy. The villagers freeze. Someone whispers, "Is it a sign?" Someone else whispers, "A curse?" All eyes fall on you. You clear your throat. It means the clouds are shifting, you say calmly. The dogs can smell the pressure change. It's a total guess. But they nod. You add, "The last time this happened, it rained within a fortnight." Even though fortnight just sounds better than 2 weeks, and maybe if you give it some cushion, no one will notice if nothing happens. For now, the moment passes. Later that evening, the elder calls you to her hut. She's not the official leader of the village, One is, really, but people listen when she speaks. She's got eyes like wet ash, and knuckles like walnut shells. You've always respected her. She gives you a bowl of something hot. It smells like onion, but tastes like disappointment. Still, it's food. She says, quietly, "The people are scared." You nod. She says, "If the rain doesn't come soon, they'll look for blame." You nod again. Then she says, "Make sure they don't choose you." That night, you stay awake long after the fires burn out. You lie on your back and watch the stars, wondering if they know things you don't. You count them, whisper their names, ask for mercy. No answers. But one of them blinks. You sit upright. A meteor? A star? A sign? You don't know, but you decide to tell them tomorrow it was a falling tear from the sky gods, and that it means the drought is ending. Because sometimes belief is more powerful than water, and right now, it's all you have to offer. It's early morning again, and you're already on your feet, even before the birds have dared to chirp. Not that many birds are left. The ones that haven't migrated or died from thirst are smart enough to stay silent these days. You gather your worn cloak and the small pouch of tokens you carry as a weather prophet, bits of quartz, a feather, some dampened herbs, and a circle of bone once, a rabbit's. Now your village's lucky charm. Or maybe just yours. You're heading out today, not far, just to the rim of the forest. Not to read signs this time, but to gather them. You need evidence, real or imagined. Because yesterday you saw 2 young boys playing near the old well, whispering and giggling in a way that made your spine itch. One of them drew a line in the dirt shaped suspiciously like your walking stick. Another had a dead crow in his pocket. You didn't ask. The forest has always been a quiet place for you. Not peaceful exactly, but muted. There's something about the hush between trees that feels like the pause between words. You remember your teacher, an old woman who smelled of wax and dust once, told you, "If the wind avoids the trees, follow it. If it gets caught, stay put." She's long dead, but her sayings echo whenever you enter the woods. The leaves are dry, crumbling like old paper. Not a great sign. But you collect what you can. A clump of moss that still has color. A stone with a line through it, natural, you think, but you'll say it was split by a lightning bolt. A pine cone that hasn't yet opened. The villagers will interpret that, however you ask them to. Historians still debate whether medieval weather prophets like you genuinely believed in their craft, or were simply playing a part to survive. You suspect the truth is both. Some days you believe, some days you perform. Often it's the same thing. On your walk back, you find a strange trail of hoof prints. Not from the village's horses, those haven't moved in days. These are fresh and deeper than they should be, like the animal was heavy. Sick, maybe. You kneel, touch the soil. Still warm. You follow them for a while, curiosity prickling. They lead nowhere, then vanish. Odd. You tuck that detail away. When you return, the village is buzzing. Not in celebrationo, not that lucky, but in tension. The elder stands near the center, arms crossed, jaw tight. A man from the neighboring village has arrived. He wears a hood and carries a scroll. You immediately dislike him. Turns out, he's another weather reader. And worse, he's loud about it. He declares that your valley is cursed, that the rains have been stolen by ungrateful hearts and impure prayers, that repentance must be made and sacrifices considered. You can feel the mood shift like fog lifting off a field. You step forward, slowly, and speak. You don't shout. You don't accuse. You simply tell a story one you invent as you go about a traveler who once warned of droughts caused by lies and fear-mongering. How that traveler vanished into the wind, and the village that followed him soon turned to dust. You mention no names, but you don't have to. The villagers, to their credit, don't chase the man away, but they also don't embrace him. He leaves before sunset, his scroll unopened. Later, someone slips you a dried apricot. As thanks, you haven't tasted fruit in months. It tastes like memory. The children, though they still stare, one draws something in the dust again. This time it looks like the sky, split in two. You don't comment. Instead, you gather the adults and share the signs you found in the forest. The moss, the pine cone, the cracked stone. You arrange them like pieces on a game board and explain what they mean. That water sleeps beneath the surface, that the trees are whispering again, that wind has weight and it's leaning your way. Quirky tidbit. In certain Germanic regions, it was believed you could summon rain by placing a frog inside a sealed jar on the roof of a barn. The frog's discomfort, supposedly, annoyed the sky into tears. You suggest something similar, more metaphorical. The villagers listen. A few laugh. But one woman takes her clay pot and sets it out under the sky, just in case. The next few days are harder. The wind picks up, but only carries dust. The sky clouds over, but never cracks. You say nothing, because you know panic waits just beneath their skin. Instead, you stage a ritual. Nothing elaborate, just candles and song. You invite the village to gather near the dried riverbed. You chant something old and shapeless. You hold your hands out like wings. You draw lines in the dirt and speak to the sky. Someone cries. You're not sure if it's from hope or hunger, but afterward, they all sleep easier. And that's worth something. The elder approaches again the next night. Sits beside you near your hut. Says nothing for a long time. Then, do you believe? You don't answer right away. Instead, you say, they do. She nods. Then, is that enough? You don't know. But it has to be. Because the alternative is silence, and silence leads to suspicion, and suspicion, in a drought, becomes deadly. That night, the wind changes again. It smells different. And as you drift off to sleep, you dream of a sky that finally lets go soft rain on dry roofs, puddles in cracked earth, and children laughing, not whispering. When you wake, it's still dry. But your hands are damp. Not from sweat, but dew. The first in weeks. You rush outside. Show it to anyone who will look. They nod. Smiles return. A boy dances. You return to your hut, heart racing. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. But today, you believe. Because they do. And maybe that's how miracles begin. You wake to a thin crust of heat already pressing down on your thatched roof. The thatch, once gold and alive, now hangs brittle and grey, shedding dry straw whenever the wind dares to blow. You roll over on your straw mat, careful not to shift too hard because every motion raises dust from the earthen floor. The drought has dried the soil, and the soil has turned to powder, and now your home is a breathing, wheezing lung of ash. Your first breath of the day tastes like yesterday's regret. You are not the only one awake. In a village that fears the sunrise, mornings begin in silence. Even the animals, what few haven't been eaten, have learned not to speak. The goats no longer bleat. The chickens lay no eggs and make no fuss. Only the crows keep talking, and everyone agrees they are rude and should not be trusted. You are not sure you trust anything anymore, not the wind, not the sky, least of all yourself, because this is the 5th week without rain, and that makes it your fault. You are the weather prophet. That's what they called you back when this all started. It was flattering then. You wore garlands of woven reeds. Old women patted your cheeks and asked what the clouds were whispering. Children followed you around, waiting to hear which way the wind would blow. You said things like, "Northwest breeze means soft showers," and "the frogs are quiet, so no storm tonight." It felt good to be needed. It felt better to be right. Now they call you by other names, mostly when they think you can't hear. Rain thief, sky liar, drought bringer. You step outside and look up at a sky that has not blinked in weeks. Just flat, white heat stretching forever, the color of blindness. You try to read the signs, but there are none. The frogs have buried themselves. The trees have stopped sighing. Even the wind seems afraid to move. You are running out of omens. The last time you tried to read tea leaves, the leaves crumbled in your hand like dead moths. When you tried to toss barley on the fire to see how it popped, it didn't pop. It just blackened. Then it exploded. You singed off your eyebrows. No one found that particularly mystical. Historians still argue whether medieval weather prophets were ever genuinely believed or just tolerated until the rains returned. Some records suggest they were consulted like priests. Others hint they were watched like potential criminals. You are currently enjoying both roles simultaneously. The village elder old Brina with the cloudy eye calls for a council. You are summoned, not invited. You sit at the edge of the circle, not quite outside it, but not within either. She asks if you have seen anything, felt anything, heard the voice of the wind. You say you saw a spider building its web across the well. You say it spun east to west. You hope this means something. Old Brina closes her eye, the good one. "That's nothing," she says. A younger man stands up, Gregor, who once tried to boil dandelions into beer and blinded himself in one eye for a week. He says you should be replaced. He says your signs are fake. He says his cousin's cousin in the next village overreads weather by licking rocks. Says, that works better. There is murmuring. This is not ideal. You are sent home without being punished. But not being punished feels like a warning. It's the kind of kindness that comes before the rope. You sit alone that evening, chewing dried thistle stalks and watching the sky. And then you see it. Not a cloud, but birds. Starlings maybe wheeling and twisting in a pattern you don't understand. You gasp. That means something, surely. You run to the village square. You tell them what you saw. You tell them that birds flying in spiral shapes mean change. You tell them you read this in a scroll. You did not read this in a scroll. But it's the only hope you can offer. That night, they let you sleep closer to the fire. That night, you are someone again. In the days that follow, people begin offering you things again. A crust of barley cake, a sprig of rosemary. One woman gives you her child's broken toy and says it brings luck. You carry it like a relic. But then nothing happens. The birds fly off. The heat returns. The sky glares harder. You start to walk further to find signs. Into the woods, to the old burned chapel, even to the cursed field where the frogs used to sing. You find bones. You find a burned shoe. You find a piece of cloth snagged on thorns that flaps without wind. Nothing tells you what you want. You start inventing signs. You do it quietly. You scatter petals in the riverbed and say they floated north. You say you felt a breeze at dawn, though you didn't. You press your hands into cracked dirt and say it feels looser. It feels like lying, but it feels worse to do nothing. One evening, a girl named Kaya who once gave you a fig in spring asks you if you truly believe what you say. Her eyes are wide and cracked like the fields. You say yes. You say it because you must. Quirky tidbit. There is a story about a weather prophet in another village who once claimed to have summoned a storm by shouting into a well. No one knows if it worked, but they sealed the well afterward. You try that too. Your village has 2 wells. You pick the lesser used one and yell into it for 20 minutes. Nothing happens. You lose your voice. The next day, clouds appear on the horizon. Not rain clouds exactly, but not the nothing sky either. A film of grey, a smudge of maybe. You say nothing. You don't want to break it. Old Brina calls another meeting. She asks what's changed. You shrug. You say nature is complicated. This makes you sound wise. Someone laughs. Someone else cries. When the first drop hits, it's on your face, not your hand, not the ground, your face. It runs down your cheek like a tear and disappears into your collar. You don't say anything. You look up. It falls again. Then again. Then the air breaks. The whole village is outside now. People scream, laugh, drop to their knees. The children run in circles. Someone brings out a pot to catch the rainwater. Someone else just opens their mouth and drinks from the sky. You are hugged, lifted, praised. You are the prophet again, but you feel nothing. Because you didn't do this. You lied. You spun false signs. You shouted into a hole. You made up birds. Still, they look at you like you saved them. And maybe that's enough. The rain continues softly, tenderly, as if the sky itself is unsure of what comes next. You watch quietly as the village drinks, bathes, and dances in puddles of newfound hope. The cracked earth softens. The withered plants lift tiny leaves skyward, tentative and brave. Yet, deep down, you remain wary. You've learned not to trust easy miracles. You've learned the skies promise nothing permanent. But just for now, this fragile rain is enough. You gather your robes, damp for the first time in weeks, and return to your hut. You close the door gently, feeling something approaching relief. Tomorrow, you will watch the clouds again. You will note their shapes and count their shadows. Tonight, however, you rest. You let your breath slow, listening to rain tap gently on the thatch. Maybe the world is listening too, finally. And for tonight, at least, that's enough. You first hear it in the distance, the slow, steady clip-clop of hooves on dry soil. Too rhythmic for a merchant's cart, too clean for farm horses, too deliberate to be anything but official. Your stomach tightens. You peek from the doorway of your creaking little cottage, and through the veil of dust kicked up by their approach, you see him, a tall man in robes trimmed with gold thread, flanked by lean priests and well-fed guards. The bishop has arrived. He does not come alone, of course. That would be too simple. With him come a retinue of monks, 2 scribes, a cook, 3 tax agents, and 1 thick-faced man with a cudgel who doesn't say much but seems to grin too much for someone wearing leather gloves in a drought. Your heart sinks. You'd half hoped the church had forgotten you, that your name was too small, your village too poor, your bone rattling too silly to be noticed. But no word travels like wind, and in the absence of rain, it seems the church has decided to investigate you instead. The bishop's banner bears the symbol of the flaming chalice clean, precise, glaring white on a field of crimson. It flaps in a breeze that doesn't carry a hint of rain. Your hands feel too big, your breath too shallow. He doesn't speak to you at first. That would be too direct. No, he walks through the village slowly, head held high, acknowledging bowed heads and trembling lips with gentle nods. He blesses a baby. He murmurs with the baker. He surveys the cracked soil around the well. You keep out of the way until you can't. You're summoned just after sunset. They gather in the church, the only building with stone walls thick enough to still feel cool inside. You're led in by a boy half your size who won't meet your eyes. Inside, the bishop waits with his priests and the village elders, seated like judges without a trial. They don't ask you to sit. At first, the bishop's voice is gentle, polite, almost kind. "Tell us," he begins, steepling his fingers as his eyes study you like one might study a strange animal at market. "What prayers have you offered?" You pause, not because you're trying to hide anything, but because you're not sure what counts as a prayer. Is tying a ribbon to a dying tree a prayer? Is whispering to a puddle a hymn? Is muttering old rhymes about swallows and frogs an offense? I light candles, you offer, and I watch the birds. I listen to the air. I try to see the patterns, my lord. He doesn't nod. He doesn't frown. He just stares. And the bones, he asks? You swallow. They're just old sheep bones. I shake them to see how they fall. It's not magic. One of the priests makes a sound, not quite a cough, not quite a laugh. The bishop silences him with a glance. And what of your altar under the sycamore tree? Now your breath catches. Someone's been watching you. It's just a place where it's quiet. I don't offer anything strange. No blood, no idols, just quiet. You sound like a child defending a fort made of sticks. The bishop leans forward. Do you consider yourself anointed by God to interpret the heavens? No, you say too quickly. I'm just. I try to help. People ask. I try to help. Without scripture, without ordination, without permission. You nod, slowly, helplessly, and yet you speak as though nature answers you. You want to deny it, but in truth, sometimes it feels like the wind does speak, that the clouds whisper, that the birds carry messages. But saying that aloud now would be like setting fire to your own feet. I only share what I see, you murmur. The questions go on for hours. They are careful, not quite accusatory. Not yet. But each one wraps around you like thread, soft and constricting, until you feel you cannot breathe without permission. They confiscate your bundle of herbs, the one with dried lavender and 2 pieces of resin you once thought might smell like rain. A priest unfurls your pouch of bones and picks through them with a sneer. Another finds your cord of knotseech, one meant to trap a storm you never caught. These are not the tools of a Christian, one whispers. You want to scream. You want to say no one trained you. that the only way to respond to silence from the sky is to make noise on the ground, that you've never pretended to be a priest or a magician, only someone trying to help, but your voice is small. Theirs fill the space. They do not arrest you, not yet. Instead, they tell you you're being observed, that your words carry weight, that you are expected to model proper obedience, that if you wish to avoid suspicion, you should attend church regularly, avoid public rituals, and refrain from claims of celestial influence. And then they leave. Or at least, he leaves. The bishop returns to his grand abbey on the hill, but not before blessing the entire village with a special prayer for rain. It does not rain. The villagers, of course, are watching. They saw the bishop speak with you. They saw the priest sniff your herb bundle like it was poison. They heard the word observation. And though no one says anything outright, you can feel it. It's in the way they pause when they see you approach, in the way they speak more softly when you're near, in how they no longer ask you for predictions but still side-eye your hands as if you might accidentally conjure something with a gesture. The children no longer run to show you feathers or flowers. The baker stops giving you crusts. Even the dogs seem uneasy. 3 days later, the tax agents return. They don't ask questions, they just take 1/10 of the grain, what's left of it, 1/5 of the preserved pork, a bag of dried beans you'd hidden behind your hearth. Church needs supplies too, one says, not unkindly. Prayer doesn't feed monks, does it? You think about saying something about how you've been fasting most days, about how your well is dry, about how your neighbors barely speak to you, but then you see the cudgel in the leather-gloved man's hand, and you say nothing. You lie awake that night, listening to the dry groan of the wind against the thatch roof. Your mouth tastes of dust. Your bones ache from sleeping on a floor that offers no comfort. Outside, an owl hoots. Then silence. You whisper the old words not out of faith, but habit. Clouds rise, winds bend, sky weep, earth mend. You wait. Nothing happens. The next day, someone leaves a bundle of charred rosemary on your doorstep. You don't know what it means, but you're fairly sure it's not friendly. You shouldn't do it. You know you shouldn't, but the silence is eating you. The silence from the sky, the silence from your neighbors, the silence inside your own bones as though your marrow has dried up and your thoughts creak when you move. You've tried staying quiet. You've tried being harmless. You've tried waiting. But the rain never comes, and now your hunger for relief is louder than your caution. So you decide, one last ritual, just one, quiet, simple, harmless, familiar. A ritual you barely remember from long ago, before the village had priests, before you knew the word heresy. A thing from childhood, a whisper of memory. You don't even believe it will work, but that isn't the point. You just want to feel like you've done something. The morning is cloudless. The sky is dry and flat, stretched like old linen faded by too much sun. It holds no promise in its color. The birds are still missing. The insects that once buzzed like tiny prophets have vanished. But the air feels thick, and you tell yourself that must mean something. You gather what little you have left, a scrap of old tallow, a butter-colored ribbon, a bowl carved from ash wood. You dig a shallow pit behind your cottage where mint used to grow. You arrange stones in a circling knot, sacred stones, just familiar ones. You take off your shoes and step into the pit. The soil is cracked beneath your feet. It doesn't yield, it resists. You breathe once, then again. You whisper. The words are nonsense, a half-remembered rhyme. You piece it together from memory and hope. You wave your arms not wildly, but slowly, like smoke. You sway your hips, hum softly, your skin prickling. You continue, and you don't notice the child. She's no more than 6 years old, standing at the edge of the field, clutching a turnip nearly as large as her head. Her eyes are wide, dark, and utterly silent. You freeze mid-step. She says nothing, just stares. You lower your arms. The chant dies on your lips. Was that dancing? She asks. You nod. Is it for rain? She continues. You hesitate, then nod again. She nods too, solemn as a priest. I like the part where you spun. Then she turns and walks away. That evening, a cow dies. You hear about it before you see it. It belonged to Dern, the blacksmith. His herd had dwindled in the heat, only 3 cows left. The biggest, a brindled one named Mayflower, was found stiff-legged in the field, mouth agape, eyes staring blankly. She just tipped, Dern mutters. No warning. The village gathers around her like mourners at a noble's funeral. She was healthy, someone says, strong. Must have been the heat, another offers, but not everyone agrees. A young man with a thin mustache whispers something to the butcher, who nods slowly and then glances at you. Just a glance, just a flick of the eyes, but it strikes like a hook in your chest. You step back. Then you leave. No one calls you. No one asks. But the air has changed. The next day, a boy sneezes. It's nothing really, just a sneeze. But his mother panics, wraps him in linen, smears goose fat on his brow, prays aloud beside the well. She's not praying to the bishop's god. You watch from behind your door. You feel the whisper before you hear it. He shouldn't have danced, someone says. They don't say your name, but they mean you. You don't sleep that night. You sit beside your pit, tracing the stones with your fingers. A breeze stirs the dust. You feel your bones loosening beneath your skin. You want to speak, to explain, to say it wasn't meant to harm anything, that you didn't curse the cow, that you didn't make the child sick, that you're just tired, small, and too scared to be dangerous. But no one is listening. The silence has made them deaf. 2 days later, another child falls ill. This one burns with fever, soaked in sweat, eyes rolled back. It's the kind of sickness that comes every year, but in the drought, it feels sharper, heavier, like an omen. You bring chamomile and honey. The mother takes it, but doesn't meet your eyes. Someone spits near your feet as you leave. The fields turn to ash. Even the weeds curl inwards. No one laughs. No one sings. No one curses the sky anymore. They just avoid your gaze. No one asks for your predictions now, but they still watch your hands, as though a careless gesture might unleash another misfortune. You cough, and an old woman crosses herself. You sneeze, and a man says, "God protect us," loud enough for everyone to hear. You stop going to the well. You draw water at night. The bishop is gone, but the weight of his stare still lingers. His presence opened a door, and now every glance feels like a charge. Every whisper is a noose being knotted in silence. You sit by your window and listen. They say he spoke the cow's name. I heard he danced in a circle. That draws devils. No head talks to birds. That's how he knows when to strike. You don't even have a bird. But truth doesn't matter anymore. You think of leaving, packing your things, taking your bone pouch, vanishing into the forest. But where would you go? Another village? They've already heard. The woods? You'd starve. No, this is your place. This dry dirt. This silence. This crooked cottage. Even if it turns against you, you decide. No more rituals. Not one. Not even a whisper. You bury the bones beneath a stone, burn the herbs, smash the ash bowl and scatter the shards. You will say nothing more about the sky. You will let it speak for itself. But silence has a price. A week later, the fevered child dies, 8 years old. The village places dry branches around the home, leaves a jug of vinegar on the doorstep not to help, but to warn. The next morning, someone marks your door. 3 crooked lines. You scrub them off, but they return. Twice. That night, there's a knock, not a gentle one. A flat, firm knock, like someone using a stick. You open the door to 3 men. They're not smiling. "We just want to talk," one says. You nod. Step outside. They don't enter. That's worse. They ask where your powers come from. You say you have none. You just watch the sky. They say your rituals brought harm. You say you danced even when the river still flowed. They say you speak to animals. You say you don't even own a dog. They say you're hiding something. You say nothing. They leave. They don't touch you. But you know what this is. The warning before the storm. Only this time, it's not the sky that's threatening to break, it's the people. You sleep with one eye open that night. Your dreams are dry and brittle. You dream of clouds that laugh, of birds that fall like stones, of children pointing at your exposed bones beneath your skin. You wake before dawn, and for a moment, the air smells wet. You rush outside. But it's just a neighbor pouring slop into the dust. No rain. Not yet. It begins quietly, as most bad things do, not with thunder or fire, but with glances held just a moment too long and smiles that falter when they notice you watching. A woman who once brought you bread now walks a longer path to avoid your cottage. A boy who used to wave doesn't raise his hand anymore. You aren't called to help anymore, but your name is still on their lips, just not where you can hear it clearly. It lingers in the pauses between sentences, in the looks exchanged when you approach the well, in the way people tilt their heads when a child cries, or a goat bleats, or the sky turns an odd color at dusk. The drought has deepened. The earth is now a maze of cracks, the streams a memory. Every wooden bucket pulled up from the well sounds more hollow than the last. The cattle are thinner. The bread is drier. The laughter is gone, and the people need someone to blame. Of course, they don't say this out loud. Not at first. They're too afraid to accuse, and too desperate not to suspect. But fear, like rot, spreads even in silence. You notice it in the little things, the way people no longer touch your arm when they speak to you, the way even the dogs growl low when you pass by. Someone leaves a bundle of charred rosemary at your doorstep. Someone else arranges pebbles in the shape of a broken circle just outside your garden. You sweep them away, but more appear. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a game, just children. But you know better. Once, someone chalks a crooked eye on your door in red dust. You wash it off with vinegar. That night, the wind howls like it's laughing. You barely sleep. The next morning, a woman's baby won't stop crying. The woman claims it's a spirit. Her sister suggests it's you. He looked at her funny yesterday, she says, too loud to be a whisper but not quite a shout. Another nods. He's always watching the sky. That's not natural. The baby's father doesn't say a word. He just stares at you across the field for a long time, holding his crying daughter like he's weighing something heavy. You don't wave. You stop walking into town when the sun's high. You start taking the footpath along the edge of the woods instead. Even though it's rockier and longer, you don't want to be seen anymore. Not like this. Once you were strange, but safe. Now you're strange and unlucky. And in times like these, unlucky is the same as cursed. Another child falls ill, his lips pale, his breath short, his eyes glassy, and people remember that you once shared a bowl of soup with his father. A goat is born dead. Someone swears they saw you hum near the goat pen the day before. You try to speak with the village priest, but he only nods vaguely, avoids your eyes, and tells you to pray more and draw less attention. That's the last time he speaks to you. You burn your last pouch of herbs in secret. You unbind every cord and toss them into the stream, what's left of it. You bury the bones deeper this time, farther into the woods, beneath a crooked tree you haven't visited since you were a child. Still, the signs keep coming. A young man leaves a chicken feather nailed to your door. Someone pours spoiled milk across your threshold. One evening, as the sun sets in a haze of golden ash, you see smoke rising from behind your house. Your small shed, the one where you kept your drying herbs, is burning. By the time you get there, it's nearly gone. No one saw anything. No one helps you put it out. You stand in the smoke alone, watching the blackened wood sigh and fall in on itself. You don't even feel angry, just cold, colder than you felt in months, as if the fire took something more than timber. That night, you pack a small bag. Just the essentials. You don't plan to leave, not really, but it comforts you to know you could, if you had to. The next morning, you hear whispers outside your window. 2 boys, maybe 15 or 16, crouching near your fence, talking just loud enough for you to hear. My aunt says he's the reason the sky broke. Did you see his eyes? Like glass. She says if you cut his shadow, no grass will grow there again. You almost laugh. It's absurd. But then you realize these aren't stories they've heard. These are stories they're making up. Stories that will become memory. Stories that others will believe. You open the window, and the boys scatter like birds. One drops a small doll made of straw and twine. It has a red string wrapped around its throat. You burn it. Of course you burn it. But you do so with shaking hands. The village holds a small prayer gathering by the well. You aren't invited. You watch from a distance as people light candles and murmur to the heavens. The priest leads them in song. No one looks your way, not even the priest, especially not the priest. Later that evening, the baker's eldest son throws a rock at your door. He doesn't run. He waits to see if you'll come out. When you do, he stares at you for a long moment, then turns and walks away. He says nothing, but that, somehow, is worse than words. You sit by the window again that night, staring out at the fields. The soil is as pale as bone. The wind smells like dust and fear. You haven't dreamed in weeks. You try to remember the last time someone touched your hand without flinching. You can't. Another week passes. The whisper becomes a murmur. The murmur becomes a voice. It's not just a drought, someone says in the marketplace. It's a punishment. For what? Someone asks. For letting him stay, comes the answer. You pretend you didn't hear it, but you did. A girl finds a dead bird with its wings pinned open and placed neatly on a flat stone. Her mother says it's a sign. Of what? She doesn't say. But she won't let her daughter leave the house for 2 days. You go to the well under cover of night now, but even then you feel watched. Once, you hear footsteps following you along the stream path. You stop. The steps stop. You turn. No one's there. Or maybe they are, just out of sight, just out of reach. That night, you light a candle, and sit in complete silence. You stare at the flame until your eyes burn. You don't speak. You don't pray. You don't move. The next morning, a child leaves a note on your doorstep. Just one word, witch. It's written in clumsy charcoal, but it's enough. The word lands heavier than any stone. That afternoon, 3 elders knock on your door. They don't accuse you, not directly. They just say they're concerned. They suggest it might be better for everyone if you didn't attend the next harvest meeting. Not because of you, one says quickly. Just. People are tense. Best to keep peace. You nod, you smile, you thank them, and you don't attend. But that night, you stand by the edge of the village and look out over the dry fields, and you whisper to the stars. Not words, just breath, just presence. Just the desperate sound of someone asking the sky to please remember them. The sky does not answer. It is still as ever. And then, one day, it rains. Not a storm. Just a single strange downpour in the early afternoon. The kind that feels like it shouldn't belong to this season. The kind that smells like relief and rotted grass. The kind that brings children into the streets, barefoot and shouting, spinning with arms outstretched. You step outside to feel it. You lift your face to the sky. It tastes like heaven. But then someone sees you, and their joy fades, and they stop dancing, and they call for their child to come inside because you're smiling, and you're wet, and that must mean something. The next day, they say it wasn't real rain, just devil's spit. They say it was a test. They say it was a trick. They say you brought it. They say you didn't. But no one says you should stay. That evening, the old shepherd finds a lamb with its throat torn open. Wolves, most likely. But that's not what people say. They say blood seals things. They say you've been silent too long. That silence is a mask. That silence hides spells. Someone paints a red X on your door. Someone breaks a jar of salt in your garden. Someone leaves a broken mirror face down on your step. You don't clean it up. You just watch and breathe and wait, because you understand now that this isn't about rain. It never was. This is about fear, and the shape fear takes when it needs a target. When the sky won't speak, people invent new voices, and sometimes those voices say your name. You begin to wonder if you should speak louder or vanish altogether, but it's already too late for both. It begins not with thunder, but with a kind of pressure in the air, thick and low, like the sky is holding its breath. You feel it before anyone else does, early in the morning before the roosters call, when the village is still quiet and the world has not yet stirred. You step outside barefoot and the dirt feels differentless, brittle, more expectant. The air clings to your skin. The wind has changed direction. You stand beneath the empty sky and whisper nothing, because there's nothing left to say. And then, a sounder low rumble, distant, uncertain, like an old man clearing his throat. You glance up. One cloud, just one. You stare at it like it's a miracle, a ghost, a memory returned. It drifts lazily across the pale dome of morning, growing as it moves, and you follow it with your eyes until it disappears behind the chapel roof. By midday, the clouds have gathered like a slow parade, not dark yet, not heavy, but real, and everyone feels it. You see them in the fields, frozen mid-hoe, staring upward. You see them by the well, hands stilled on the pulley rope, necks craned back. Even the priest forgets his sermon, pausing as a gust of wind tosses his robes about his ankles. The sky groans again, louder this time, like wood stretching. Someone gasps, someone claps. A boy laughs, and his mother scolds him but doesn't hide her grin. And then, without warning, the first drop falls cold and round and pure, hitting your cheek like a single word long forgotten. You look to the woman nearest you, and she looks back, stunned. Then another drop, then 3, then many. The rain begins in earnest. Not a storm, not a flood, but rain enough to darken the dirt, to fill the air with the smell of earth and joy, and something like hope. Children run through the village barefoot and shrieking, arms wide, mouths open. Cattle moo low and confused. A girl spins in a circle, slips in the mud, and rises laughing. Old men take off their hats and weep. Someone shouts your name. At first you think it's joy, but it isn't. It's your name said like a question, your name like a warning. You freeze where you stand, half-soaked, unsure. A group is gathering near the church. They're not dancing, they're not laughing, they're pointing. At you. He smiled, someone says. He knew it was coming. Of course he did, another answers. He brought it, or maybe he ended it. Too perfect, isn't it? What did he trade for it? This isn't just rain. This is something else. And suddenly the joy fades not from the sky, but from the people. You feel it drain from the air like warmth from a dying fire. They begin to move toward you, not running, not rushing, but walking with a kind of deliberate rhythm that makes your spine tighten. You back away. You raise your hands. You try to speak, but no words come. A woman spits near your feet. A boy throws mud. A man says a prayer, loud and sharp. The priest doesn't stop them. He watches. You realize, too late, that you shouldn't have come outside. You shouldn't have smiled. You shouldn't have let the rain touch your skin. You are no longer the strange one, the quiet one, the odd whisperer of clouds. You are now the one they fear even more than drought. Because the rain has come, that means the end of their suffering must be explained. And who better to blame than the man who stayed dry while others thirsted? You flee, not far, just to the edge of the village. You wipe the water from your face, though it feels like a blessing. You huddle beneath the eaves of an empty barn and watch as the villagers dance again, this time without you. They thank the bishop's prayers. They thank the priest's fasting. They thank the relic in the chapel. But they do not thank you. They never did. And now they never will. That night, the rain continues. Gentle, steady, soft. You cannot sleep. You lie on the floor of your home, eyes wide open, counting each drop as it hits the roof. The ground outside drinks deeply. The air smells clean, but inside you, nothing feels washed. The next morning, someone paints a line of ash across your door. Someone else leaves a dead toad on your windowsill, throat sliced open. The priest holds a service of thanksgiving. You are not mentioned. You are not invited. You are not expected. A new man arrives in the village that evening, traveling friar with bright eyes and dry boots. He smiles as he blesses the well. People rush to him. He speaks of divine mercy. He speaks of penance. He speaks of rain as a gift to the faithful. And no one mentions the man who predicted the birds would leave. No one recalls the night you burned your herbs. No one remembers the rituals under the sycamore tree. Not in public, anyway, but in private, the whispers remain. They are not done with you. One afternoon, you find a chicken's foot nailed to your door. It's fresh. The blood hasn't dried. You take it down and bury it, but your hands shake for hours afterward. You begin to hear your name spoken again, but softer now, lower, like something between a curse and a spell. A child draws a picture of you with horns. Her father laughs and doesn't correct her. At the market, people stop selling to you. You offer coin, and they turn away. You try to explain, and they shake their heads. The rain, they say, changed things. We're moving forward, they say. We don't need old ways now. The irony stings. When they were thirsty, you were needed. Now that they're wet, you are a memory they want to erase. One evening, as the sun sets behind a silvered sky, you find a bundle left at your doorstep, your bone pouch, dug up, unwrapped, open, its contents scattered in a pattern you don't recognize. Not yours, not your way. You burn it all. You don't cry. You don't pray. You just sit on the ground until the smoke dies. The next morning, you begin to pack, not in haste, not in fear. In resignation, you leave behind what isn't necessary. You take only what you must. A few coins, a cloak, a bit of bread. You leave at dawn. No one stops you. No one notices. Or maybe they do, and they choose to let you pass. Either way, the road welcomes you with silence. You walk until your feet ache. You sleep beneath trees that do not speak your name. You dream of places where rain is just rain. You don't know where you're going. You don't care. You only know you cannot go back. Days pass, then weeks. In a new village, someone asks where you're from. You tell them only, east. They don't press. They don't ask about the sky. And for a while, you are just a traveler, just a stranger, just another quiet figure with a tired smile. But one night, as the wind shifts and the trees rustle with uneasy voices, someone knocks on your door. A farmer, face lined with worry, holding a withered root. "The crops," he says. "They've stopped growing." You meet his eyes. You know what he wants. You know what comes next. You sigh. You nod. You follow him outside, into the dark. The sky above is clear, too clear, and somewhere, far behind you, in a village that once whispered your name like a curse, the rain still falls. You do not leave with a scream, or with flames licking your doorway, or with villagers hurling stones as you flee through the woods. You do not vanish in a puff of magic or a wisp of smoke. You leave the way most forgotten things do quietly between footsteps. The morning you go, no one sees you off. No one asks why or where. Your door swings open behind you with a soft creak, and you do not look back. You walk with the last of the morning fog, as if the mist itself were carrying you away. In your hand, a bundle of old linen and bread. In your pocket, a smooth stone you found as a child, one you always thought might mean something. You walk until the village is just a shape in memory, a cluster of sounds and smells and crooked paths where your name once meant, maybe he knows, and then later, maybe he's to blame. The road ahead is not paved. It splits and narrows and forgets itself. It winds past silent trees and ditches that haven't seen water in weeks. You walk past fences where laundry hangs still, as if even the wind doesn't bother to visit anymore. The world feels empty, but it isn't. There are other villages, other fields, other eyes watching the sky with unease. You pass through some of these places. You keep your head down. You say little. You become a man who speaks of weather only when spoken to. You do not predict. You do not warn. You do not guess. Sometimes they ask. A farmer notices the way you look at the clouds and offers you a stool beside the fire. A widow says, You remind her of someone who used to say when frost would come early. A child tugs at your sleeve and asks why the crows have vanished. You smile, gently, and say you don't know. Which is true. Now, you've taught yourself to forget, to unlearn, to become someone who knows nothing about omens, or frogs, or the shape of wind in tall grass. You start carving spoons. It helps. The rhythm of knife against wood is steady and forgiving. You learn the grain of the tree, the way it wants to curve, the places it resists you. You carve spoons until your fingers blister, then until they callous, then until they forget what it felt like to hold bones and tell fortunes. In the third village you pass through, a boy gets sick. His mother begs the priest to intervene. The priest begs the traveling friar. The friar prays and fasts and wails through the night. The boy survives. They say it was faith. The next drought comes 2 summers later, and you hear of it in Passinga. Merchant speaks of fields turned to dust, and prayers echoing off silent heavens. You nod, say nothing, and keep walking. The merchant asks if you've ever seen a sky refuse to speak. You tell him, softly, that you have. You don't tell him your name. He doesn't ask. That night, you sit beneath a tree and watch the stars appear, one by one, like eyes waking from long sleep. The wind is warmer than it should be. You remember how you once read wind like a letter, how you once sang to puddles and muttered to clouds. Now you hum to yourself, something tuneless and soft, and press your palms into the dirt to remind yourself where you are. You stay in that village longer than the others. They don't ask much of you. A man there teaches you to make dye from walnut husks. Another shares pickled onions that taste of dust and vinegar. A woman lets you repair her roof in exchange for boiled potatoes. No one stares at your hands. No one watches your eyes. When it finally rains, no one credits you. It's just weather. Just the sky remembering itself. You sleep soundly that night, not because you are safe, but because no one is waiting for you to perform. You dream of wind, then of birds, then of nothing at all. And then, one evening, years later perhaps, it's hard to measure time when you live by the angle of the sun and the quiet of your own breath, you hear someone say your name again. Not the one you go by now. The old one, the village name, the prophet's name. A girl murmurs it to her brother as they walk past your door. Mama says he used to speak to storms, she says. Her brother asks if that's why the leaves don't fall near your window. She shrugs. You don't correct her. That night, a knock comes at your door. A man with eyes full of worry and a hand gripping the wrist of a shivering child. He says the fever has returned. He says the priest is away. He says someone told him you used to know things. He asks softly, desperately, if you can look. You say nothing. You look at the child. Her skin is pale and hot. Her breath rattles like seeds in a gourd. You reach for a cool cloth and place it on her forehead. You do not speak to the wind. You do not light candles. You just sit with her. The man weeps in your doorway. In the morning, the fever breaks. He says nothing. He just places a jar of honey on your table and leaves. You don't taste it, but you keep the jar. Later that week, another man comes. He says there's a strange smell in his barn and asks if you know what it might be. You tell him it's probably rot. He nods, but he lingers. They say you used to be someone, he murmurs. You nod. I was. He asks who you are now. You shrug. I carve spoons. He doesn't press further. He just leaves you a log of seasoned pine. You carve it into bowls. You never sell them. But you keep carving. Every week someone comes. A question, a sickness, a bird gone missing. You listen. You nod. You don't promise anything. You just sit beside them. And somehow, that's enough. The rains come and go. You don't speak of them. But sometimes, when no one is looking, you still notice the shape of clouds. You still feel the weight of air before it shifts. You still remember the scent of sky about to break. One evening, a child asks why your hands shake when it thunders. You tell her it's from carving too long. She says she doesn't believe you. You smile. One night, you dream of the village. Again, not the way it was, but the way it might have been if the rain had come sooner, if the bishop hadn't arrived, if the cow hadn't died. In the dream, no one blames you. No one fears you. You are just someone who watches the clouds and makes quiet guesses. You wake with tears on your cheeks and no shame in your chest. Eventually your back begins to bend. Your legs ache in the cold. You sit longer than you stand. The road feels far away now. But sometimes, someone passes through someone from another place, another drought, another story that's beginning the way yours did, and they ask you what to do when the sky goes silent. You do not give them bones. You do not give them chance. You give them tea. You tell them to wait. You tell them to breathe. You tell them that the sky forgets sometimes, but it also remembers. And then, when they leave, you sit by your window, close your eyes, and say nothing, because you've said enough. The village changes. Faces come and go, but some stay, and some remember. They remember the quiet man with the deep eyes and weathered hands who didn't promise storms or sun, but who listened when the earth cracked open and didn't turn away. You die on a spring morning, quietly, without pain, in your sleep. It rains that day, not much, just a sprinkle, the kind of rain that doesn't soak, only kisses, the kind that makes the field smell sweet. A child finds you in your chair, head tilted like you're watching the clouds. They bury you beneath the old tree near your cottage. No one carves your name, but a girl leaves a spoon on your grave. And when the next drought comes, and it will, they will look to the sky. And then, slowly, uncertainly, they will look to one another. And someone will say, there used to be a man who could read the rain. And someone else will say, he vanished. And someone else, quieter still, will say, but the weather remembered him. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all you ever were. A pause between storms, a breath between centuries, a whisper in the wind. And now, as the sky closes behind you, the world moves on. But every time the rain returns after silence, somewhere in the distant hush, your name still drifts through the dust. They bury you beneath the old tree near your cottage. No one carves your name, but a girl leaves a spoon on your grave. And when the next drought comes, and it will, they will look to the sky. And then, slowly, uncertainly, they will look to one another. And someone will say, there used to be a man who could read the rain. And someone else will say, he vanished. And someone else, quieter still, will say, but the weather remembered him. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all you ever were. A pause between storms, a breath between centuries, a whisper in the wind. And now, as the sky closes behind you, the world moves on. But every time the rain returns after silence, somewhere in the distant hush, your name still drifts through the dust.